Hi, and welcome to this very special VIP baseball webinar brought to you by Ford Lincoln Queens. For the next half hour, we're going to have a discussion involving the two-time Cy Young Award winner of the National League of the New York Mets, Jacob deGrom. I'm Howie Rose. I'll be your host for this next half hour. And right now, let's bring in Jacob from his home down in Florida. Jacob, how you doing this offseason?
Good, Howie. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I know this is, to this point anyway, we're still a little less than 4 months out from what would be opening day. It's scheduled for April 1st, but under the circumstances, are you going about preparing for this season the way you would any other, or is there a change in your routine because of the uncertainty about the start date?
No, I'm preparing as if it was going to start on time. That's what we're hoping for. We're hoping to play 162 games, so I'm preparing to be down there mid-February for spring training.
So what is that routine like for you at this stage of the off season?
I've been throwing every day. I don't take a whole lot of time off. I took a little more time off this go around than most. But I took like 3 weeks off and then started throwing with my dad every day. And then I will touch the mound February 1st for the first time. That's normally what I do.
Your dad's a tremendous guy. We see him a lot during the season because he's on the road and some of the places we go to. How big an influence was he on your career?
Yeah, he was a big influence. Like I said, I still play catch with him to this day. And then in college, infielder and high school and even in Little League, they put up a batting cage for me when I was about 12. So we would hit every day, take ground balls every day, play catch every day. So definitely a huge influence on my career.
Did he have a playing background too of some sort?
He only, I think, played in high school. He always had a job, so he was always working. So I think that's part of, seeing how hard he worked growing up. That was part of, what drove me to do the best I could and try to make it to the big leagues. And I was fortunate enough to be able to do that.
And do it well, of course, with 2 Cy Young Awards and a finalist for the Cy Young Award this past season. So now we get set for what we hope is going to be, as Jacob says, 162 games. And I know you've submitted questions, so rather than me sitting here and just babbling on and on with questions of my own, we're going to get to as many of yours as we can. And the first one comes from Aiden and Jacob Puzio. And this one's very simple, Jacob. Why is baseball your favorite sport?
I don't know. I started playing when I was 6 years old. Actually, funny, my dad, I asked him because my son, he's 4 now. So I was talking to my dad about when I started playing, and he said he took me out when I was 5 years old to play, and I didn't want to play. But started playing when I was 6, and ever since then, just loved it. It's a game of inches, and if you really sit back and look how the game works, it's very interesting. People say it's boring, but I really do love playing the game. So I did enjoy being an infielder when I was younger, but now when I'm asked that question, I would actually rather pitch. So it's just the game that I grew up playing, and it's my favorite sport.
Well, our next question leads into exactly what you were just talking about. This comes from Lillian Zuckerman, and she wants to know, what made you switch from being a shortstop, as you were as far along as college at Stetson University, and instead became a pitcher? How'd that evolve?
There was, my sophomore year, the fall. So it was going into my junior year. We had a scout day, and one of the scouts said that they wanted to see me off the mound. So I ended up throwing off the mound, and then the plan was going into my junior year, play shortstop and close. And we weren't winning a lot of games. So my coach came to me and said, "Hey, we're going to have you start some games." And I was like, I didn't really want to do that. I enjoyed playing every day. I enjoyed being in the infield, and enjoyed hitting. So it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do, but that's kind of what happened. And looking back, I'm thankful it did happen.
But how do you get from, I don't really want to be a pitcher, to winning a couple of Cy Young Awards? I mean, that would sound like a pretty wide gulf that you've got to close. To say you did it well would be an understatement. So you must have fallen in love with the idea of pitching somewhere along the line, didn't you?
Yeah, honestly, it was after I had my Tommy John surgery, right after I was drafted. the rehab crew that I had down in Port St. Lucie, and really showing me, how to pitch and how to, I guess my arm slot wasn't very good at the time. My elbow was below my shoulder, which puts a lot of stress on your elbow. So, continued to work on that, and then came up with a routine, and, I still follow that routine pretty closely to this day. So, every day what you need to do to get ready to be on the mound that fifth day, and, hopefully as sharp as possible.
But you don't get to use the bat anymore, or at least you didn't last year. And I see that smile indicates you're hoping that what we're seeing, and I don't know whether or not this is a bargaining ploy or chip or what, but we're hearing that right now the National League teams have been told to prepare for the 2021 season as though there will not be a designated hitter, which means you're going back to the bat rack and you're going to do some hitting on your own, which I know leads right to my next question, and that comes from Dan Bontemponi. I hope I pronounced that right. I believe it's pronounced Dan. If there's no DH in the National League next year, are you excited to get back in the batter's box? Leading question.
Yes, I am. I enjoy it. There's some days I don't, but I enjoy hitting. And we get to take batting practice, which is always fun. So that becomes a little competition with the other pitchers. So I'm looking forward to getting back in the batter's box.
Did you take any BP this past season just in case they got into a bind where, for whatever reason, they might have needed another bat?
No, I didn't take any. I think in spring, in the first spring, we had just started swinging the bats, and then that's when it got shut down. I actually got in that bat in spring, struck out. But no, once there was a DH, none of us took any batting practice.
It was pretty competitive, right? Because Noah Syndergaard can swing the bat. Stephen Matz can swing the bat. You can swing the bat. Marcus Stroman's a tremendous athlete, and I don't recall much of him in the batter's box. But is there a certain competitiveness just between the pitchers as far as your hitting goes when you do get the chance to hit?
Yeah, definitely. I think the competition is always average and who can hit the most homers. So batting practice is definitely who hits the most homers in batting practice. And then throughout the year, highest average is normally what we compete on.
Well, we've got some other questions I want to bring from our audience here. This next one comes from Kevin McEnany, who is going to put you right on the spot. He wants to know, who is your favorite teammate?
My favorite teammate? I've had a lot of really good teammates, but I would probably say my closest friend would be Stephen Matz. Going back to that rehab year in 2000, I had my Tommy John in 2010, rehabbed all of 2011. Steve was part of that group, and that's a long time, a year of just rehabbing. You go in early in the morning and you get done pretty early around noon, and you have the rest of the day. So me and Steve became really close friends. We did a lot of fishing and stuff, and we've been close friends ever since then.
Do pitchers, because it seems, at least historically with some of the teams I've been around, that this has been the case, pitchers tend to run with the pitchers and the hitters tend to kind of run with the hitters. Does that affect the interpersonal relationships between teammates on the team? I mean, do the pitchers sometimes look down at the hitters and vice versa?
I think our clubhouse has done a good job of everybody gets along well. I became very friendly with David Wright. Me and Conforto, the past few years, our lockers have been next to each other. So I think our group does a good job of, everybody kind of mixing together and being that solid group that we would like to have.
Well, here's a question from Lucas McLaughlin, and we talked about this a little bit relative to your pitching, but how do you consistently keep your velocity up as you get deep into a game? You can be pitching in the 7th or even 8th inning, and if you're throwing 97, 98, 99, you even touched 100 this year several times, especially early in games. But how do you manage to maintain that velocity deep into a start?
I think that goes, with the work that I put in the off season, throwing a lot and my in-between start routine. I throw every day in between starts. I get off the mound twice. So I think it just has to do with that preparation and that build up to be able to go deep in games and still maintain that velocity. I think as a starting pitcher, my goal every time I go out there is to go 9 innings. I know I haven't done it very many times, but that is my goal, to stay in there and try to complete the game.
And, you're talking about throwing every day, even between, especially between starts, of course. There have been kind of different opinions over the years about whether pitchers should throw every day or not. Rube Walker, when he was the Mets pitching coach, really kind of pioneered that, but that's a long, long time ago. Have you been part of organizations, or not so much at the professional level, but just with different teams and those that have been structured different ways in the front office, who had different philosophies on how often to throw between starts?
There was some debate, shortly after my rehab, whether or not it was beneficial to throw the day after you pitched, or if you should just, run and kind of let everything recover. But I think that's kind of a feel thing, because if we have a off day in the year and there's no workout or anything at the field, that next day you come in and without throwing the one day, my arm, I noticed, does not feel very good. So for me personally, anytime I take a day off, it takes an extra day to actually feel better. So my mindset is to get it moving. It doesn't have to be anything crazy the day after, just some light catch. And then that following day, I seem to feel a lot better.
Well, we've got a question here that references the greatest Mets pitcher of all time, Tom Seaver. And that's a name I've dropped several times watching you pitch over the last few years, that there's this pantheon of all-time Mets pitchers, and we kind of refer to it now as a Mount Rushmore, if you will, which includes Tom Seaver, Jerry Koosman, Dwight Gooden, and now yourself. And there are a couple of people who have asked questions in this group of questions that I've received that refer to Tom, but this one in particular comes from Matthew Somo, who asks what it means to you when people compare you to Tom Seaver and the impact that he had on the Mets and you're having on them now.
For me to even, it's an honor to even be mentioned with Tom. What's crazy is when we go out on the field early, sometimes they'll have on the outfield where the strikeouts go, they'll have like all-time stats, and to see his stats and what he did in this game is, just as a Met, is very impressive. And to be mentioned, just be mentioned in the same sentence as him is an honor. And it's very, very humbling.
Back in his day, he would get, in an average year, around 35 starts. Now it's 30, 31, somewhere in that neighborhood. But he also would throw over 20 complete games. And, for the great pitchers of that generation, Juan Marichal, Sandy Koufax, Bob Gibson, others, it was not at all uncommon to have 20, 25 or more complete games in a year. Is that an impossible thing for you to fathom now? Or do you think that if pitchers were groomed differently from the outset of their careers through the lowest level of the minor leagues and on the way up, that you could still do that pitchers could still pitch with that kind of endurance?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I would almost want to say it's not, because I feel like if it was, I would like to be groomed that way. Mm-hmm. Because, that's one of the stats that you look up, and I don't know the exact number, but the amount of complete games. And I'll be up there and I'll even joke with the bullpen catchers. I'll be like, okay, I only have a few hundred more to try to get to.
Yeah, right. I mean, you can't make sense of that, right?
No, it's honestly hard to make sense of when you look at that number. And, I would like to say it's impossible, because if it wasn't, I would like to be groomed that way. But I'm going to go out and say it's impossible.
But do you think it's, and I don't know which organization would be bold enough. A lot of people around the game would probably call it dumb enough to say, you know what, we're building from the ground up, whether it's an expansion team or a team that's bottomed out. And from now on, as we draft pitchers and develop pitchers, we want to push them to go as far as they can in a game. I mean, you guys, if anything, are bigger and stronger and better conditioned, and the nutrition and the diet is better than it was years ago. Theoretically, it should be feasible, right? But so do you think that an organization would have a chance to succeed if they tried to groom their pitchers that way? I know it's hypothetical, but the human body would seem to be able to handle it because it did before.
Yeah, you would think so. I don't know if it's the human body being able to handle it, or just the amount of faith that they have in the back into bullpens. You know, because it's funny talking to like David Wright. He said the main goal was to, when he first came up, was to try to get to the bullpen. And now, you know, having played with him, he's like, now everybody that comes out of the bullpen's throwing 100. You don't want to face them. So I don't know if it's more of how the game's going. I mean, you see some teams using an opener. So I think it's more of like the way the game's going versus actually letting somebody do it.
And what do you think of that philosophy? Obviously, the Rays have had success with it, but how do you feel about it?
I like starting the game. I'll leave it at that.
Makes sense. And, you know, one other thing I read yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before, it doesn't matter, is that you're talking about these guys coming out of the bullpen now, and they're all throwing gas. The average major league relief pitcher this past year averaged about 9.5 strikeouts per 9 innings. And that's the way the game has evolved, right? I mean, we're all talking about the 3 true outcomes, as they say. But when you start a game, is it in your mindset not to put the ball in play, to just punch everybody out?
Sometimes I have that mindset. Sometimes I pitch to contact. It's normally that mindset happens when I get a little aggravated, like I'm going to see how many guys I can strike out. But, you know, early in the game, I'm like, hey, let's get quick outs, see how long I can stay in the game. You know, if I get aggravated, then I'm like, all right, let's go for some strikeouts.
You had the one game, this is a few years ago now, against the Marlins. You struck out the first 8 to start the game. And then of all people, the pitcher, was it Jared Kozar?
Yeah, should have had a DH then.
Yeah, right? But, I mean, did that kind of frost your flakes about as much as any at-bat that you've ever faced in the big leagues? Because, you know, you could have retired 3 straight innings worth of strikeouts and the pitcher gets you?
Yeah, that was pretty frustrating. And yeah, that's really frustrating. I had a year where I had a hard time getting the pitcher out. I think that was that same year.
Strange.
Very
strange. It all worked out okay in the end.
Yeah.
And one thing that's worked out okay as far as the fans are concerned is all the excitement about the new ownership with Steve Cohen having taken over. And the question here is from Jonathan Berger, who wants to know, in the short time that Steve has taken over the club, have you noticed any differences, or even to just kind of smooth that question out a little bit, what has the experience been like on whatever level you might have gotten acquainted with Steve Cohen?
Yeah, I had a conversation with him and went very well. Seemed like a very good guy, and, you know, actually looking forward to meeting him in person. You know, it'll be interesting to see, you know, the moves we make, but hearing what he had to say is the plans to win. And, you know, that I say it all the time, that's the ultimate goal. It's a team sport, and that's to win a World Series. So, you know, hopefully add a couple pieces that give us a chance to do that.
And the fun thing right now, of course, is that everybody's in play. You know, when a prominent free agent is available, especially if he's a fit at a particular position, you know now the Mets are going to be in on him. And I don't know about you. I mean, even when I'm playing golf, I'm checking my Twitter account to see, all right, did they sign this one? Did, you know, 1 minute they're signing Springer, the next minute they're signing McCann, the next minute it's Bauer. Do you have a rooting interest there as far as who or how many?
I just think whoever can help us. Like I said, the goal is to win a World Series. So whatever pieces we need, you know, hopefully we get them and go out there and win a World Series in 2021.
Are you checking Twitter or social media every few minutes as well to see if anything's up?
I honestly haven't been. Once I get here, me and the kids are running around a lot. So I kind of stay off the phone when I'm home.
Now you've got what, 2?
2.
4. Jackson is 4, right?
Jackson's 4 and Aniston's 2. So they keep me busy.
So you're on the run. You don't need to work. You don't need to throw. You get running in.
Yeah, we're constantly out doing stuff. So
I bet. Here's a question from Brian, who does not include his last name, and this gets back a little bit to what we were talking about as far as your love of baseball. But what made you choose baseball in your youth as opposed to other sports?
I think my dad liked it a lot. Growing up, I really liked playing basketball. A lot of action. Don't get me wrong, I loved playing baseball as well. But, I think seeing how much my dad and watching games with him, seeing how much he liked the game, that's kind of the way I went. I'm glad I did.
And when you were watching games with your dad, and this question comes from Lisa Cohen, who were your baseball heroes when you were growing up?
Oh boy, people aren't going to like this answer.
Which Yankees?
I grew up
Is that where we're going?
No, I grew up a Braves fan, and I like Chipper.
Right. Oh yeah, you live near Chipper, right?
Yeah, Chipper's hometown is like 20 minutes from where I'm at. So pretty much everybody in my area grew up a Braves fan and Chipper fan. So, but that I liked watching good infielders. I liked Omar Vizquel. I liked Jeter. I liked Nomar Garcia Parra at the time. There were a lot of good infielders that I like to watch. I just enjoyed seeing how they played the game.
And of course, you were a shortstop, as we talked about before, so I'm sure you were able to draw from them. What about from a pitching standpoint? Did you look, as you became more involved pitching in college and later professionally, did any particular pitcher influence you strictly from a defensive standpoint to see how once they release that ball, now they're a defender as well, what you might have taken from a particular pitcher who's made you a better defender?
I can't think of one. Once I got into the college and professional level, then it was kind of more of constantly playing games and not as much watching games. So, I still think I could be a better fielder. I always say it whenever I feel like I'm throwing the ball my best, I'm not falling off hard to the first base side. So part of that would help with being a better fielder.
Did you ever see guys like, and obviously you didn't see him pitch when he was active, but Bob Gibson had a very violent sort of follow through where, right-handed power pitcher, and he'd fall off towards that first base line. Do you marvel at how guys who in some cases had not awkward mechanics, but, a little unusual in terms of how they fell off of their follow through or any quirk in their delivery became as successful as they did, even though they did things that might have gone against the norm?
Yeah, definitely. Even now, like watching how people throw, it's very interesting how everybody throws different. There's a bunch of different programs that kind of say which way you should throw and which not, but everybody kind of throws a little bit different. So it's very interesting to see, and I feel like that's what makes the game great. From pitchers, you're getting all these different arm slots versus everybody the same versus like it would be a pitching machine. So it's very interesting to watch and something that I sit there and I'm like, wow, look how this guy throws, or look how it's something that we point out.
And you also have, I guess it's the benefit of being part of what I guess is really the first generation of pitchers who can now take advantage of the tremendous analytical information relative to things like biofeedback, so that they can measure your endurance and see when you might be reaching that point where that rubber band's about to snap and you're out of gas or things like that. How helpful is that to you? And what do they show you in terms of maybe printouts that let you know internally how much more you've got in any given game?
They'll show you pretty much whatever you want. I try to keep it pretty simple. I try to look at how my pitches are moving. Are
you doing that in game between innings?
Not in game. I'll normally ask after the game, hey, Jeremy Accardo was the one who was in charge of that, and I would ask him, and he'd be like, "You tell me." And I got to where I could tell him what most things were at, just by how I felt in the game. So I think that goes back to like the prep in between, kind of knowing how I feel. And, I can tell him if my arm's a little bit higher, a little bit lower, just based on how I felt that game.
It's amazing how pitching coaches can spot things. I remember having a long conversation with Dave Island about this, how they can spot things with a naked eye that no fan in the stands, even if he's either a learned baseball fan or played the game, pitched at whatever level. It's amazing what they could see with the naked eye. You talked about release point or arm slot or whatever. Will they tell you things if a pitching coach comes out and says something of a technical nature that they could see with the naked eye? Would they be telling you something you didn't know, or can you kind of tell that information on your own too?
You can kind of tell, but it definitely helps whenever they say, "Hey, I think my main thing is you're rushing a little bit." So that means my front side's getting quick and my arm's not able to catch up. So my arm's kind of dragging, front side's flying open. And Hef did it a couple times this year. And then, getting that little bit of reassurance, you're thinking, "Hey, maybe this is what's going on." And then, they watch you throw. You can't see yourself though, so they see you throw pretty much every day. So they're really good at picking up on that. And Hef did a good job this year of noticing whenever something small was off with me and would point it out and help steer me in the right direction.
That's Jeremy Hefner, of course, that Jacob's referring to, the pitching coach now for the New York Mets, entering what we hope will be everybody's full season. Will be his first full season. Everybody had the 60-game season in 2020. But that means Luis Rojas will get a full crack at it as well in his first go-around as a major league manager. What were your impressions of Luis?
Louis did a nice job. First-year manager, first time in the big leagues. I had him in the minor leagues, very good with communication. Tells you exactly what he's thinking. And I thought he did a very nice job with the guys, having an idea of what he wanted to do in every game. So, I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do with a full season.
Okay, we've got time for one or two more questions before we've got to end this. But here's one from Anthony Galapani, who wants to know who is the hardest person to strike out, and probably wants you to telegraph this. What pitches would you throw to strike him out?
Hardest person to strike out. That's a tough question. I think for me, the one that I have the most fun with trying to strike out is Freddie Freeman. He battles me, and I happened to get him on a curveball this year, and I don't throw many curveballs. And for some reason, it was me and him. He actually started laughing, and he's like, "What is that?" And I was like, "I don't know." It was 3-2. He had fouled off like 5 pitches, and I'm like, "I guess I'm throwing this," and ended up striking him out. And we were both laughing at what had happened and the pitch I decided to throw, because he never sees that. So he's a very tough out. He can hit the ball out of the ballpark. He'll hit it the other way. A guy like that who uses the whole field and shortens up with 2 strikes is tough. So I would have to say he is the toughest for me to strike out.
Of course, he's an MVP now. You're a 2-time Cy Young Award winner. Is there a certain different level of respect that the elite players in the game have for each other? And you see these guys at all-star games and such, but particularly in the hitter-pitcher relationship, as you just described with Freddie Freeman, is there a certain level of respect that transcends the norm?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that goes, even if a guy hasn't, won any MVP or any award. I think for me, you look through a lineup and you pick out the guys that can hurt you, and you say, "Hey, I'm not going to let this guy hurt me with runners on." And it's normally the guys in the middle of the lineup that you have that respect for, because you get a couple guys on one pitch, you can be down 3 runs versus, maybe you pitch them a little tougher and face the next guy. So I think it's just looking through a lineup and you have respect for those guys. And, anybody can, like I said, I had a hard time getting the pitcher out. So for me, I have respect for anybody who steps in the plate or up to the plate. They got a bat and they're trying to do damage, and I'm trying to eliminate that from happening. So I respect anybody who steps up to the plate with a bat because I'm trying to get them out.
All right. Well, we've got time for one last question here. This one comes from Deneen Timlin, who has a 10-year-old who loves to play baseball. Deneen says he's very talented. Any advice is valuable. He's a strong pitcher, but he can also play some other positions. And really, this is a generic question and hopefully a very useful one. What would your advice be for a 10-year-old kid who might have some ability or might just be out there having fun about how to approach playing baseball at that age?
I think what you just said, having fun. Dan Warthen was my first pitching coach in the big leagues, and walking in for every start, he would tell you something, and then he would say, most importantly, have fun. You started playing this game because you loved it and you played it to have fun. And, that's the most important thing, to go out there and like, for me, I still enjoy it. It's still every time I get to take that mound, it's just a blast. So, I think that's the most important thing in this game is to enjoy the time you get to play it and just take it all in.
Well, Jacob, I've told you this to your face before. It's an absolute treat watching you pitch. You're right up there with the greatest who've ever done it for the New York Mets. And that's a privilege for all of us to get to watch every fifth day. We appreciate you taking time here. Just have a great, safe, healthy holiday season, you and your family. And hopefully we'll be able to see each other live and in person one of these days if we're ever allowed to. But hopefully that'll come as things clear up. So, Jacob, thanks so much for joining us.
Howie, thank you.
And for everybody who contributed questions and was part of this webinar today, we want to thank you, as well as our friends at Ford Lincoln Queens, for putting this together. I'm Howie Rose. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a safe, happy, healthy holiday season. Take care.